Welcome to my video about using data in the classroom. As it says below, it's focused upon the idea of Wave 1 teaching. For me, this is about using the data you have on the students, both prior and summative and formative, to ensure that they access the lesson. It is not simply a case of relying upon students to learn by osmosis. And it's not simply a case of giving a one-size-fits-all aspect to the lesson. It is a case, I think, of ensuring that the students know where they're coming from, where they need to go, and how they're going to get there. It's based upon 3 strands, which I'll show you in the next part of this video. And anything that I use here, I'm keen to share and discuss. So please talk to me. There are 3 strands to using data in the classroom. The first of these relies upon your mark book. I believe that a mark book should essentially contain formative data, as they are often used for just summative means. I think having a mark book that is electronic allows you to use data in ways more easily and more effectively than using a paper copy, but a well-kept paper mark book is far superior to a ill-kept and ill-conceived and ill-used electronic mark book. From that mark book, it leads to data summaries, and these are used to share with the students in reasonably regular interviews, perhaps once every half term, depending on how often you see your classes. Whether, for example, you're an academic subject that sees your students many times a fortnight. And they're also used for parents' evenings, where you can also contain other information, requests, discussion, and they can be updated digitally too. Finally, data is used in seating plans, and this is to identify patterns in your classroom, pockets of achievement, underachievement, and also to aid any observers that come into your classroom too. The mark book itself, which I speak elsewhere about on my website, is the prime tool for using data. My ideal situation sees me only entering data in once. The mark book aims to then convert and to merge that data into the data summaries and into the seating plan. As you can see from the bullet points, it aims to do what a paper mark book does, which is to record summative data for reporting purposes. As well as the seating plan population, it aims to track trends. And for me, I use this via my rubric marking, but I'm also looking to develop a VLOOKUP table to give numerical weightings to the conventional learning systems, and that would aim again to track trends across the classroom. I speak there in my penultimate bullet point about the idea of ranking students' work. For me, the rank should not be summative, and I'm talking about the humanities subjects here, being an English teacher. I think that ranking the ability of students to access the higher level criteria that you create for yourself via a personalized rubric for that class allows you to see how able they are to access the skills and the thinking that is needed for the higher grades. Whilst you may think that students who access the higher level skills on a lesson by lesson basis are able to always achieve the highest summative grades, that is not always the case. Finally, the ultimate bullet point there matches the second bullet point, that the mark book will allow you to populate data for both your seating plans and for your data summaries. The mark book itself can become rather long, but it is separated into 3 separate sections. The first of these sections is the prior data. This is the student name, the admin number, and I think the admin number is essential in order for you to mark efficiently and to populate this notebook in good time. It contains both the target and the aspirational target of the student, and then it contains essential information such as the gender and, if applicable to your school, pupil premium via free school meals, service children, looked after children, EAL, SEN, and there's also an opportunity within the mark book here to add extra notes. The notes would be contained here that would elucidate specific learning needs. I also contain prior data, in our case used from Serco, and all of this can be hidden. For me, the act of converting and populating data into the mark book allows me to actually use the data and not just read it on a page. From that, I have my formative data that I'll show you, and my formative data is here, and the summative data, which is here. As I mentioned before in the previous slide, the prior data can be filled with anything you want. Because it is a spreadsheet that can have columns added to it, you can create any data here you want. In regards to reading data, we use the accelerated reading system. Although it does not yet have effective exporting to Excel, it allows you to create the standardized reading score, which can then be plotted into an average standardized reading score. This is particularly useful for then ranking reading ages across the class. The summative data here I think is useful in the sense of you have your basic summative data. This is what my mark book would look like, I think, at the start of my teaching career. But then you have the formative data next to it. This is contained in an average rubric score. This is somewhat Americanized. It relies upon you creating, as I said before, differentiated rubrics. From the course, the criteria given to you in your exam boards and your Key Stage 3 curriculums. And from that, you can get an average class score for that term, and you can measure the average pupil achievement against the class score. I have 1 currently as the highest achievement, and 4 is the lowest in this. I may change this, but for the time being, I use that because my school currently uses effort grades of 1 to 4, 1 being the highest achieving effort grade. From this, students' work is ranked formatively and color-coded as well, and you can see how students are able to access the high-level skills or not. So here, for example, you can see the student here is consistent across both the autumn and the spring term in their ability to access the criteria. However, this student, as you can see, has made a substantial improvement in the standard of their formative work. This will populate it later on the seating plan. From this as well, you have the summative autumn grade, and here you have the overall standard across all the terms in terms of students' formative work. This is an example of what the formative rubric based aspect of the mark book would look like. Ranked as before, as I said, on a 1 to 4 basis, it's split into autumn, spring and summer. I've begun to have the reading and writing skills, and I mark essentially, I think, 1 thing per week. Usually this is homework, because it is easier to take a homework home, and also the homeworks I set at the moment are based upon completing independently the sequence of work focused upon that week. Increasingly, I'm using it to allow students to improve work, and then from that making decisions about what the students will be doing in future. At the base of each of these pieces of work, you can see a number, and contained in these cells are also comments as well for the direction I tend to take the learning of the students based upon their prior attainment. At the top, again, I have comment boxes, and those comment boxes are shortcuts to the rubrics and based for each of those lessons. I've used my data summaries primarily for parents' evenings. However, I find them useful to share with the students too. At the moment, I'm using a snip tool to paste these into PowerPoint. Windows 7 is fantastic for this. It is possible to update a widget, if you will, onto a PowerPoint slide with Excel, but it's so buggy and it's hard to get to work. So essentially, I use the snip tool. This is an example of an initial data summary. You can see here prior and current reading data. You can see the target for the student. You can see how they've completed this term's work compared to the other term's work. And notice that the actual grade, the summative grade given by the student, is the same both times, because summatively, when they were assessed and moderated, that's what they achieved. But their ability to access higher level skills, according to the rubric, dipped in the second half. And we can see here why. However, this, as we can see, is writing, and we can see here that with the reading, this student is weaker. So I think more detailed and more effective analysis of this student's particular skills can be made, and appropriate intervention in lessons, nothing external necessarily, can be given. Seating plans should not be seen, I think, as something that's solely for an observer. There is a tremendous amount of data created by teachers based on their students, and using this data in its various forms is the only way of making good use of it. The seating plans that are attached into the mark book are self-updated and contain both qualitative and quantitative data. For me, seeing patterns of formative work in a seating plan is useful to see, for example, if the students at the back are achieving less than the students at the front, and seeing if that matches up to anything. So here is an example of a seating plan, and I have, of course, as I said before, removed student names. The notes here, again, are self-updated from the mark book, but you can put these in yourself. I think on this version I didn't put the numbers in, but the numbers, they match to the student seating plans. And in order to edit this seating plan, you would simply cut and paste that seat into anywhere, and it would correspond with the previous seating plan. Initially, the seating plan would be in alphabetical order, so you populate this. You'll populate the mark book first, presumably in alphabetical order, and then you would take each of the student names and place this into an appropriate seating plan for yourself. The next part of this video is going to show you what kind of information is contained in each of these students' places. So for each student, they have, of course, their name at the top, and This name could also be given to a nickname or even just their initials if you don't want a full student name to be given for various reasons. For me, the power of this is that it not only gives the target of the student, but it gives the summative data, and that is based on the report summative data, not necessarily summative data given over several times in a term. It then calculates as a numerical figure their standard of their formative data, so their ability to access criteria over the course of that half term, and it then converts this into either a green, an amber, or a red flag. Intuitively, you should of course understand that the highest achievers in the class, top 20% or so, are flagged green, and the lowest 20% are flagged red. This is of course proportional. So even in your highest achieving class, you may have students achieving A grades, but if their formative work is not consistently accessing the highest level, they can be flagged as red. Beneath this, there is very useful differentiation data, and this is created by a colleague of mine at my school, and it's very credible. Essentially, based upon a system used in another school in a town near us, all students in the seating plan are identified as having particular needs, and these divide into special educational needs, being gifted and talented, being EAL, all coming under the banner pupil premium, which of course things like surface children, looked after children, and free school meals. If the teacher indicates the student has any of these, they place the initials within this box underneath the student place name on the seating plan. When you do this, it color codes it. You have to ensure that you put the code in order of this step, and if the student has more than 3 of these categories, it goes amber, and an observer can then see quickly via color coding and in more detail via the letters the differentiation needs of that particular student. So, just to show you in slightly more detail, in a larger picture, this is what ideally a student's placemat would look like on the seating plan. For me, this contains enough information to show where they are in the class, to show where they should be going, and to show where they are now, to show what differentiation needs they've got, yet still be able to fit onto a single page. As ever, the way I use my mark book and seating plans and data summaries is evolving and changing. My future thoughts are to have ways to enable students to respond to the data summaries, to record aspects of their work on data summaries, perhaps for example using a snap scanner, so you can actually place digitally examples of their work and perhaps print off a parents' evening to demonstrate their ability to access certain skills. Also to see if I can connect rubrics to data summaries easily, to make it clear exactly in parents' evening or in interviews with the students where they're achieving and where they need to improve themselves. And ultimately to evolve the mark book so it has the right balance between being detailed but not being arduous. The more conditional formatting and the more data and equations that are being employed within it, the slower it loads up and the slower it works. Ultimately, as I said before, the most important thing in a mark book is that it's been used effectively. All of the ICT in here is just to facilitate time-saving measures. It goes without saying that initially when I began using this and trying to develop these styles of using a mark book and a seating plan, it didn't save me time. It took a lot of time. However, now I know from the start of the year that I can create my seating plans I can sustain my MarkBook, and I can create, I think, very useful data summaries much more quickly and much more effectively than I ever have done before. At the moment, my MarkBook is still a prototype. If you're interested about using it, please contact me, and I'm creating different versions of it for people on request. Thank you.